City fan, get ready, because today we need to have a serious conversation. There is a young gem annoyed with his situation in Europe. There is a Spanish giant eyeing up your absurd goal machine. There is a goalkeeper on course for the exit in a player plus cash deal. And there is also a massive contract extension being prepared behind the scenes. It is one of those nights when it feels like the whole club is boiling at the same time. So think of this as your daily catch-up on everything that is shaping the future of Manchester City, and of course, do not forget to drop that like and check if you are subscribed, because the next transfer windows promise to be chaotic. Let us start with one of the most sensitive stories for the fan who likes to follow the kids from very early on, the case of Claudio Echeverri. When City decided to invest in him, the idea was clear. Bring in a South American jewel, polish him calmly, put him in a competitive context, and prepare the boy to gradually move closer to the first-team squad. No skipping stages, no throwing on more responsibility than his age allows, but also no letting the talent be wasted without minutes. That is why the loan to Bayer Leverkusen seemed on paper like a perfect plan. Only real football does not always follow the ideal script. Instead of gaining games, confidence, and experience, Echeverri ran into a much tougher scenario. Heavy competition, very few minutes on the pitch, almost no match rhythm, and an adaptation process that became more and more painful. The promise of a starring role turned into a sequence of timid cameos, and what should have been the first step of his European journey ended up becoming a kind of blockage in his career. From the player's side, the frustration has only grown. Recent reports indicate that he has already made it clear to his family and representatives that if nothing changes, his wish for the future is to return to River Plate in 2026. In the boy's mind, it makes sense. It is the place where he feels at home, where he knows he can play, regain confidence, shine, and maybe prepare a new attempt at a leap back to European football later on. For someone so young, the feeling of being stuck in time weighs far too much. But at City, the reading is completely different. The club believes that if they pull Echeverri out of Leverkusen in January, it will not be to put him on a flight back to Buenos Aires. The priority is to keep him in Europe, whatever it takes. The internal message is clear. Anyone who wants to be a protagonist at a European giant has, at some point, to go through this period of discomfort, cultural shock, and adaptation to a more physical, more intense, faster game. Going home now might be comfortable, but it would delay that process even more. This is where an old acquaintance of those who follow the City football group comes into the conversation. Girona. The Spanish club has, in recent years, become a sort of high-level laboratory for young talents. Competitive environment, strong league, attacking style of play, and a recent track record of developing players who then make the jump to even higher levels. It is no coincidence that behind the scenes, Girona is seen as the most logical destination if Echeverri really is redirected in January. A return to River Plate, however emotionally tempting it may be for the player, is treated almost as the last card on the table. City want him to understand that his future lies on this side of the ocean. The idea is for him to feel European as soon as possible. Language, culture, style of play, everything. Any trip back home now can become a step backwards that is hard to reverse later. And it is precisely this conflict between the player's heart and the club's cold planning that turns the situation into a silent but explosive drama. Imagine what is going on in the boy's head. On one side, the feeling of being pushed to the fringes without a run of games, watching his career crawl while other talents of the same generation are already earning their place. On the other, the pressure to prove that he is capable of succeeding in Europe, of justifying the investment, of showing that he is not just another name lost in the list of South American prospects who never quite worked out. In the middle of all this, City's fan base watches from afar, trying to understand which path is best for the club's future and for the player himself. You, watching this, can be very honest. If it were up to your opinion alone, what should City do with Echeverri in January? Force him to stay in Europe, maybe in a more favorable environment like Girona, or listen to the boy's wish and negotiate a return to River, even if that means giving up part of the original plan. It is the kind of decision that can define not only his career, but also how far City can maintain their image as a club that really knows how to handle young talents. While this saga involving the Argentine youngster is heating up behind the scenes, another, even heavier story is circulating through the corridors of European football. The idea that Manchester City would be willing to do anything to strengthen their midfield, including opening talks that involve the most untouchable name in the squad. We are talking about the chase for Federico Valverde, one of the engines of Real Madrid's midfield, and the whispers that link this pursuit to the name of Erling Haaland. Yes, that very same one. The context helps explain why City are looking so hard at their midfield right now. Rodri, usually the team's metronome, has not had the most stable start to the season. Hamstring issues in the back of his thigh have kept him out of 3 of the last 4 league games, forcing the coaching staff to tweak the team's shape and test alternatives. Without that absolute holding midfielder who organizes everything with and without the ball, City look like a different side. It lays bare that, as strong as the squad is, there is still room, and maybe a need, to reinforce that midfield line. Not long ago, there were rumors that Rodri himself could be used as a makeweight in a record-breaking attempt to bring in Jude Bellingham. That talk cooled. Bellingham remained a reference point at Real Madrid, and now the focus has shifted to Valverde. According to information coming from Spain, Pep has already put the Uruguayan on his highest priority list, seeing in him exactly the sort of player who fits the system. Insane intensity, late runs into the box, versatility to play inside or wide, technical quality and tactical discipline. The problem is, Real Madrid are not exactly known for making it easy for players they consider fundamental to leave. And in this case, the key to the vault has a very specific name: Haaland. The Spanish club have been eyeing the Norwegian for a long time, seeing him as the elite finisher who can lead their attack for the next decade. Behind the scenes, the theory is simple. Madrid will not accept letting Valverde go in a normal negotiation. If this wheel ever turns, it will be in a scenario where Haaland is part of the conversation, whether as a direct swap piece or as the central element of a gigantic operation. And that is where this crashes into City's reality. Today, the entire attacking structure of the team is built around Haaland. He already has 14 goals in the Premier League, 6 more than any other player, and remains, for many, the best pure finisher on the planet. The team attacks with him in mind, the crosses are aimed at him, the runs in behind are designed so that he appears free in the box. He is not just a great player, he is the axis around which the entire attack spins. As exceptional as Valverde is as a midfielder, with dozens of Champions League games under his belt, praised even by opponents like Jurgen Klopp, and seen as a trusted piece at Real, the competitive maths is brutal. You do not dismantle the best attack in the world in order to try to climb a rung in midfield, especially not when you are fighting for titles on all major fronts, and you need a number 9 who can decide games on his own. Without Haaland, any sporting project at City looks very different. Of course, in the rumor mill, a lot of things get blown out of proportion. Back-channel conversations, hypothetical possibilities, scenarios that only work if a massive list of conditions are met. All of that turns into headlines. But this is where I pass the ball to you. How real do you think this talk of Valverde for Haaland is? Is it something that deep down will never leave the realm of speculation? Or do you believe that in some distant future, a crazy deal involving the two could actually appear? While the European giants fuel these blockbuster theories, City are also moving around the supporting pieces, those that not many people follow on a daily basis, but which make all the difference in building a squad. And this is where the situation of James Trafford appears. A goalkeeper who seemed ready to take on a bigger role, but who now finds himself, once again, in the eye of the storm of a possible deal. City's interest in Tino Livramento, Newcastle's right-back, is nothing new. In the last summer window, the club had already looked at him as a possible long-term heir to Kyle Walker. The idea was simple. Bring in someone young, with the physical capacity to cope with the team's intense style of play, and at the same time, enough time to be developed calmly. But Newcastle dug their heels in. Long contract, player seen as essential to the project, high asking price. The result? Nothing moved. In the middle of this whirlwind, Trafford's own situation became even more complicated when Hugo Vanna, the new sporting director, took advantage of the final day of the window to bring in Gianluigi Donnarumma in a market opportunity. A huge signing, the sort that raises the level of the position immediately, but which at the same time left Trafford's pathway almost completely blocked. How do you compete for a place with a goalkeeper who arrives as an automatic starter, coming from a European giant with national team and big match experience? Trafford, who was coming off 2 seasons as first choice at Burnley, now finds himself on the bench, fighting for minutes in cup competitions, hoping for the odd run-out here and there, whilst watching his dream of securing a spot at the 2026 World Cup drift further away. The ideal scenario for the development of a young goalkeeper rarely involves being stuck as the understudy to someone practically untouchable. And it is precisely this combination of factors that has put his name on the table as a possible make-weight in a deal with Newcastle. According to recent information, City have not taken Livramento off their radar. Quite the opposite. The club continues to monitor his progress and already see a potential England call-up before the World Cup, which would only increase his market value. To try to make the transfer feasible, one of the ideas on the table would be to offer James Trafford as part of a player plus cash package, lowering the pure cash outlay, and at the same time, giving Newcastle a young goalkeeper with potential who has already been tested in the Premier League. From the cold perspective of squad management, it makes sense. City solve an important issue at right-back, open up space for Trafford to get more minutes at another club, and still balance financial fair play using a homegrown asset. But from an emotional and sporting point of view, the question is inevitable. How far is it worth going in terms of giving up a promising, club-developed goalkeeper to solve a positional problem in another area of the pitch? Perhaps the best solution, at least in the short term, is a loan in January. Trafford could be sent to a club where he would have guaranteed first-team status, regular game time, and visibility to fight for a spot in Thomas Tuchel's England squad for the World Cup. City, meanwhile, would gain time to decide whether, in the medium term, they see him as a future number 1 or whether his natural path really is to be part of a permanent transfer. In either case, the January window looks like a turning point in his career. Meanwhile, at the other end of the dressing room, the conversation changes tone completely. Instead of doubt about the future, the topic is protection, security, and legacy building. City's internal leaders are preparing to call one of the main men in the squad to the table and discuss a new contract. And, honestly, it is about time. After so many big exits, keeping hold of those who are still symbols of the project becomes an absolute priority. Last season was anything but calm. 3rd place in the league, elimination in the Champions League round of 16, and that painful defeat in the FA Cup final against Crystal Palace left open wounds. It was obvious that something big needed to change. The arrival of Hugo Vanna as director of football came along with a real squad revolution. Kevin De Bruyne, Kyle Walker, Ilkay Gundogan, Ederson, James McAtee, Scott Carson, all gone. One era ended and a new one needed to start immediately. At the same time, important names like Jack Grealish, Manuel Akanji, Claudio Echeverri, and Vitor Roque were loaned out for a season. A team that for years had an extremely stable core suddenly found itself going through a deep transformation. It is no coincidence that the start of the campaign was turbulent. Defeats to Spurs and Brighton, an uncomfortable place in the lower half of the table in the first few rounds. Questions about whether the cycle of success had finally run its course. But City did what they have got used to doing over the last decade. They reorganized their ideas, fine-tuned details, recalibrated their mentality, and, little by little, started to accelerate again. In the next 14 games, there were 11 wins in all competitions. A performance worthy of a team that truly wants to fight for trophies until the very last day of the season. A Champions League playoff spot was practically secured, confidence was rebuilt, and suddenly, that narrative of a turbulent transition gave way to the feeling that the team already has a new competitive core. Even so, the board know that it is no use just buying reinforcements or betting on market opportunities like Antoine Semenyo's $65 million release clause that keeps hovering around January conversations. First and foremost, they need to make sure that the current spine of the squad is secure, committed, and protected from outside pressure. And that is exactly the logic behind the new deals already signed with names like Rico Lewis, Ruben Dias, Nico O'Reilly, and Cainho. Now, the next in line is Phil Foden. With only 18 months left on his current contract, he is approaching a key moment in his career. After a complicated year, full of injuries and personal issues, Foden has gone back to playing at an extremely high level. He has scored decisive goals, like that header against Manchester United, shown with a brilliant brace against Dortmund, and, with that, has also regained his place in the England squad after a year away from call-ups. Foden is not just an important player. For many supporters, he is the personification of what City want to be. A club capable of developing a world-class talent in-house and at the same time surrounding him with elite pieces so that he can shine at the very top. Allowing his contract to run too close to its end without a renewal would be a management mistake that is very hard to justify. That is why talks over a new long-term deal are already being prepared with great care. And this is where I speak directly to you again, fan. In your view, is there any doubt that Foden deserves a robust long-term contract fully aligned with the status he has today within the club? After everything that happened last season, after all the departures and all the rebuilding in the squad, does it make any sense at all to imagine a future for City without him as an absolute protagonist? What is clear is that Manchester City are living through a moment of rebuilding and reaffirmation at the same time. On one side, they are trying to sort out the future of young talents like Echeverri and Trafford, balancing the players' wishes with the needs of a gigantic project. On the other, they are weighing up bold moves in the market, such as the possibility of going after names like Valverde, even if that involves conversations that bump up against the almost untouchable figure of Haaland. And at the same time, they are working to protect their references like Foden, so that the next cycle is not remembered only for painful exits. If you have stayed with me this far, you have already realized that everything is interconnected. Decisions about loans, renewals, possible swaps, and multi-million-pound negotiations all blend together and shape the City side that will be out on the pitch in the coming years. And the most impressive thing is that we are talking about a relatively short slice of time, with a lot set to happen as soon as January. Now, City supporter, let's stitch all of this together to understand the full picture. Because when you look at things separately, it feels like four different stories. Echeverri's struggle to adapt, the almost unreal speculation involving Haaland and Valverde, James Trafford's uncertain future, and Foden's renewal. But when you put the pieces together, it becomes clear that it is all part of the same movement. Manchester City trying to reinvent itself without losing what made it a giant in the first place. Starting with the most sensitive axis of all, the balance between betting on young talents and keeping a squad ready to win right now. Echeverri almost symbolically represents this dilemma. On one side, the need for patience, for understanding that not every player crosses the Atlantic and explodes straight away. On the other, the pressure for results. The demand that every investment brings a quick return, especially at a club used to constantly competing for trophies. When City considers taking him out of Leverkusen and putting him in an environment like Girona, it is not just a simple loan switch. It is an attempt to correct the course without abandoning the project. It is as if the club were saying, "We believe in you, but we need to find the right context for your talent to flourish." And at the same time, it sends a message to the market. City is not one of those clubs that gives up on a player at the first sign of difficulty. That carries weight in the minds of other youngsters who, further down the line, might have to choose between different offers. Except that, behind all this nice narrative, there is the harsh reality of the dressing room. Every minute that Echeverri does not play is a step back in the race against other youngsters of the same age around the world, and City knows this. That is why there is urgency for a decision in January. They cannot wait until the end of the season and hope that, out of nowhere, the situation changes. At a club of this size, plans are reviewed all the time, and the feeling is that this time, the review will be tough and straightforward. Meanwhile, at the other end of the squad, the club is dealing with the exact opposite. Not the fear of losing a talent still in development, but the horror of imagining life without the player who defines the way the team attacks. Haaland is the kind of footballer who raises the level of any team he steps into. He is not just a goal scorer, he is a permanent focus of attention for defenses. Even when he does not see much of the ball, he drags markers, opens space, intimidates. It is exactly for that reason that the rumors about a move involving Valverde and Haaland provoke such a reaction. It is as if the market were testing City's limits. Is there any combination of pieces that would make this club consider letting its number 9 go? And up to now, the logical answer remains no. Not because Valverde's quality is in doubt, which it clearly is not, but because the impact of taking Haaland out of the side runs too deep. City would not just have to replace a player. They would have to redesign the whole system. But notice how this links with everything else. When people talk about rebuilding the midfield, strengthening the area with someone like Valverde, looking for alternatives for the days without Rodri, or monitoring names like Semenyo because of a clause that is relatively affordable by Premier League standards, the message is clear. The club knows it is at a point of transition, between an era that began with De Bruyne, Gundogan, Walker, Ederson, and company, and another that needs to be sustained by new pillars. This is where Foden appears as a central piece of this new phase. He is the bridge between past and future. He first started getting minutes while surrounded by the veterans who made City dominate England, and now he is becoming the most recognizable face of this new generation. A long, renewed contract, with the status of an undisputed star, is not just a formality. It is a public statement that the team plans to build around him, that he is part of the backbone that cannot be put on the table under any circumstances. You can see how, on this chessboard, there are two types of untouchables. There is the immediate untouchable, like Haaland, without whom today's team loses a huge part of its firepower. And there is the project untouchable, like Foden, without whom tomorrow's team loses its identity. Everything the club does, assessing youngsters out on loan, sounding out midfielders, studying swaps, analyzing clauses, is filtered through this balance between present and future. And it is precisely in this context that James Trafford's situation takes on a different meaning. At first glance, it might look like just another case of a goalkeeper losing his place after the arrival of a big name like Donnarumma. But on closer inspection, it is also a snapshot of how City manage their assets. Trafford is not seen merely as a useless backup. He is a piece that can unlock an important deal, such as one for Tino Livramento, or generate a handsome fee in a permanent sale, helping the club to maintain the financial balance demanded by the regulations. At the same time, City need to take care of the image they project to young players. If every talent coming through the academy or signed at a young age simply becomes a bargaining chip, the message can be dangerous. That is why a well-planned loan, giving Trafford minutes, prominence, and visibility, might be the ideal middle ground. The player feels valued, the club protects the asset, and still keeps the door open for a big move in future. Now imagine, supporter, a scenario in which all these decisions line up. Echeverri is redirected to a club like Girona, gets a run of games, gains confidence, and comes back in a year or two much more ready to compete for a place in the first-team squad. Trafford is loaned to a side where he becomes undisputed number 1, stands out, plays in a World Cup under Tuchel, and returns with a different weight. Foden renews, fully embraces the role of technical and emotional leader. Haaland is kept as the central piece, while the board calmly finds a midfielder of Valverde's level in the market without having to sacrifice the Norwegian. If all of that happens, City not only get through a turbulent season, they emerge from it stronger, with a renewed but coherent structure, a younger squad, hungry, supported by a few established names, and with room to grow over the next 3, 4, 5 years. It is not a simple change of pieces. It is a new cycle. But there is also the other side of the coin, the one where rash decisions can come at a high cost. If Echeverri is poorly managed and ends up getting lost between bad loans and a lack of confidence, City do not only lose a player, they also lose part of their pulling power with other South American gems who look towards Europe cautiously. If Trafford is sold too early, without getting the right chance at the highest level, the club might see a goalkeeper explode at another giant while being left with the feeling that they wasted something that was in their own hands. And if, further down the line, through some strange combination of factors, City give in to the temptation of involving Haaland in any kind of deal without being totally convinced that it is the right moment, the attacking rebuild that would be needed afterwards would be enormous. Another number 9 capable of maintaining this level of output and impact does not always appear from one day to the next. The risk of dropping a tier is real. That is why every rumor, however absurd it may seem at first glance, needs to be viewed within this wider mosaic of decisions. City are not just building a squad for the next season. They are defining who will carry the badge on the pitch when this current generation has finished its cycle. And that runs directly through names like Foden, through the futures of players like Echeverri and Trafford, and through the way the club handles approaches for its biggest stars. There is another important detail that many people forget, the emotional side of the supporter. For those in the stands or at home, the club is not just a pile of spreadsheets, reports, and contracts. It is affection. It is attachment to specific players. It is fear of seeing an idol leaving through the back door. It is anxiety about the future when things seem too unstable. When the supporter hears that De Bruyne has gone, that Gundogan is no longer there, that Walker has left, that Ederson has moved on, the feeling is that an era has truly ended. It is in these moments that decisions such as Foden's renewal work almost like a hug for the fan base. It is as if the club were saying, "Calm down, some things will change, but others are here to stay." At the same time, stories about possible swaps involving Haaland have the opposite effect. They awaken the fear that nothing is truly untouchable, that any player can be fitted into a financial equation. That is why the communication around these situations is so important. When it leaks that Echeverri wants to return to River in 2026, for example, it is vital that City are able to show that they are thinking about what is best for his career, and not just about protecting an investment. When talk emerges of using Trafford in a package for Livramento, it needs to be clear that this is not about discarding someone, but about finding a scenario in which all parties benefit. And when rumors appear that Haaland could be used as a make-weight in a deal with Real Madrid, the stance has to be firm. If there is no absolute conviction that this makes sense on a sporting and structural level, the club must treat it as speculation and nothing more. January, then, appears as a kind of first big test of this new cycle. It probably will not be a transfer window full of spectacular signings in terms of quantity, but it can be decisive in terms of the quality of decisions. A well-chosen loan, a renewal signed at the right moment, an opportunity like Semenyo's clause being handled with the necessary calm without desperation. All of this may look small in isolation, but together it sets the tone for the rest of the season. And of course, all of this happens while the team keeps playing every 3 days, chasing league points, Champions League qualification, and staying alive in domestic cups. That is the challenge for the Giants, planning for tomorrow without letting today slip through their fingers. The board work with projections, numbers, and reports. Pep and his staff deal with training, performance, and tactics. But in the end, it is the pitch that brings everything together. Imagine a City side in March or April, with Foden renewed and perhaps living the best spell of his career, Haaland still piling up goals, Echeverri making positive headlines in Spain, Trafford shining in a smart loan move, and the Valverde for Haaland rumors sounding like nothing more than a winter fantasy that has been left behind. That would be the ideal scenario to confirm that the club have come through the storm still on course. But none of this is guaranteed. That is why your view, as a supporter, is so important in this whole discussion. It is not just about approving or rejecting a signing. It is about understanding what you want to see from City over the next few years. A club that buys ready-made stars without paying that much attention to the academy and to youngsters out on loan? Or a club that tries to balance the immediate hunger for trophies with the care needed to build a squad that renews itself from within? If you have stayed with us until now, you have already realized there is no simple answer. Every choice has a cost. Every move in the market affects a piece in another area. And that is exactly what makes this moment in Manchester City's history so fascinating. We are watching, in real time, an attempt to create a new era without destroying what has been built so far. So that's it, City supporter. If you enjoyed this in-depth analysis, stayed until the end, and want to keep up with all the backstage sagas, possible swaps, renewals, and moves that can change the club's future, make sure you drop a like now, because that helps a lot to keep bringing this kind of content to you. Take the chance as well to subscribe and check that your subscription is active, because whenever there is breaking news about Manchester City, the transfer window, or rumors involving Haaland, Foden, Echeverri, Trafford, or any other name linked to the club, you will get everything firsthand. Turn on notifications so you do not miss anything. Leave in the comments what you would do if you were in the board's place, and I'll see you in the next video.